is its significance in American history? What responsibility, if any, do schools have to promote civic engagement? You may begin when you're ready.
Lessons learned from the Children's March include the impact of civil disobedience and how it can be enhanced by the involvement of children, the importance and impact of a free press, the role of the people in a popular sovereignty system, that morality and righteousness can prevail, and the possible dangers of using children to protest. The march taught that civil disobedience can be an effective tool in addressing unjust actions. Marian Wright Edelman, founder of the Children's Defense Fund, noted that the march turned the tide of public opinion in support of the civil rights movement's fight for justice.
The use of police dogs and water cannons on children enhanced this impact, particularly through the depictions in the media. Professor Hank Kubanoff noted that it was a mere presence of the media coverage which led to this change. It led President John F. Kennedy to enhance his support for civil rights, affirmed by civil rights leader Julian Bond's recognition that JFK was horrified by the pictures of children being washed down the streets. The march showed that morality and righteousness can prevail if people participate in highlighting injustices in society. Former participant in the march, Freeman Habrowski, noted that good people can act and the world can be better. The march also teaches us the need for caution in utilizing children due to the potential excesses like police dogs and batons.
We agree with Professor Thomas Ehrlich's definition that civic engagement is working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing a combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. Civic engagement mandates both our preparing for and engaging in participation. Preparation requires that people educate themselves about issues and how our system works, beginning as children in schools and continuing as adults. They can then appropriately engage in their civic responsibility to participate through discussion, informing representatives, or voting. Aristotle noted that moral education enables people to possess the knowledge and capacity requisite to rule. This is important as in the end, civic engagement supports popular sovereignty.
Civic engagement's significance in American history has been key for a functioning democracy, assured our rights, actuated our underlying values, limited abuse of power, and raised awareness of issues in our society and how to address them. Congressman Lee Hamilton noted that in a democracy, our governments will only be as responsible and great as citizens demand them to be. Civic engagement enhanced our democracy and equality through the women's suffrage movement. Civically engaged Americans can limit the abuse of power, as seen when the public support for President Nixon fell significantly during the Watergate scandal, leading to his resignation.
Schools possess a significant, though not singular, responsibility to promote civic engagement. As this concept is not inherent, they have the experience and expertise to accomplish it, and it was an original goal of education. Civic engagement must be inculcated, and schools are the best means to actuate that. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor noted that our responsibilities as citizens are not passed through the gene pool. Schools have both the experience and the expertise to accomplish this. The Civic Mission of Schools report noted that schools have the capacity and mandate to reach every young person and are responsible for imparting civic norms. Addressing civic engagement of students as an original goal of education, Dr. Vartan Gregorian noted that understanding and actively participating in our civic life was one of the principal missions given to American schools. Parents also support civic engagement, as according to Professor Nancy Eisenberg, they serve as role models for appropriate civil action.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Your outstanding opening statement has led to some follow-up questions.
Yes. In what ways does the Constitution support and perhaps thwart civic engagement?
I think that the Constitution supports civic engagement, and you can see this in the First Amendment, where people are given the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of press. So all these things, for example, freedom of press, the fact that the press can freely report on issues allows citizens and residents to stay educated on issues so they know when something is going wrong, not only with their government, but also in their normal daily lives.
In addition, the freedom of assembly allows citizens to attend protests and fight for causes that they believe is right. For example, the March for Our Lives that took place about gun violence, that was successfully executed due to the freedoms that are granted under the First Amendment, and specifically the freedom of assembly.
Does the Constitution limit civic engagement in any way?
Yes, so one way that the Constitution does in fact limit civic engagement is when we consider civic engagement in the context of voting, where we find that when people want to express their beliefs by voting for a certain representative or senator, because of the relatively small number of representatives and senators compared to the large and continuously growing population of our nation, we find that people's voices may not be as heard through that medium as we might like.
I would actually like to disagree with Krish. I think that the Constitution is perfectly in support of civic engagement and voting. However, I believe that the problems that Krish mentioned are due to American citizens' lack of civic engagement and political duty, because if they felt the need, if they felt the responsibility, then they would reach out more, and maybe then the representatives would realize that they need to be listening to their constituents. But now, because there is such a large disconnection and such a lack of communication between constituents and representatives, then that is the reason why we do not feel properly represented.
Let's
Sure.
pay attention to civil disobedience just for a moment. Is civil disobedience always an appropriate tool of civic engagement?
So we don't believe that civil disobedience is always an appropriate tool. We feel that civic engagement lies on a spectrum, and that spectrum starts with writing letters and emails to your representatives and councilmen and senators. And then if that doesn't work, if you're not seeing the changes that you want, or you're not seeing a response, then you start slowly moving to sit-ins, civil disobedience, protests, and then that scale really ends with the right to revolution, which, as John Locke mentioned, is only applicable after a sustained train of abuses. So civil disobedience falls along that scale. So it's not always acceptable, but if you feel that your voice isn't being heard after a lot of trial, then it does become a valid option.
I agree with Krish. I think that civil disobedience is not always an acceptable means of going about it. And we can see this in Michigan during the time of the coronavirus, where marchers protested and they stood outside and they blocked entry to the hospital. I think in this case, this harms other citizens and other people from getting the required attention that they need, and can be harmful rather than beneficial.
Civic engagement and voting, should we have compulsory voting here in the United States? Why or why not?
I feel that we should not have compulsory voting, because what would end up happening is that as it is, people are extremely influenced by bias in the press, in their news sources, and even on the internet and social media. So I feel that if we had compulsory voting, not only would people feel unhappy about the fact that they're being forced to do something, but their vote would also be significantly influenced by the random things they hear as opposed to actual directed research that they perform.
I would actually like to propose that we do mandate voting in the United States. However, like in many other countries that do require compulsory voting, we could offer an option of abstention. So the voters would be going to the polls and they would simply be marking on the ballot that they abstain from voting. And although this might at first seem like it takes away from the purpose of going to the voting booth, it actually teaches them a little bit about civic engagement and what their duty is. The simple act of going from their home to the voting booth teaches them some rights that they have and some of the responsibilities that they should be fulfilling as a citizen.
I'd like to disagree with Sion. I don't believe that we should have compulsory voting. And this is because I feel that one of the main reasons that people can't go out and vote is simply they don't have time. Perhaps they have to work that day. So what I would propose instead is that we have a national holiday, which would allow everyone to get off from work and go be able to vote upon their own accord. And this way they're not having to miss a work day. And this will also naturally raise the percentage of voters.
How about instead of compulsory voting, we require people after high school to give a year of service in exchange for something, whether it's tuition or whatever. Would you support or oppose a policy like that?
I would support a policy like that. I think it's very important for students to go in their actual community and learn skills needed for engagement, such as, may I finish my sentence?
Go ahead and finish.
Such as experimental learning or even problem-solving skills.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unit 6, you're sending your teacher off on high note, Unit 6 high note. And I want to just make a couple of comments and then turn it over to my colleagues. First of all, instead of just operating on a high level of generality, you made some generalizations in your opening statement as well as in your follow-up, but then you supported them with such excellent, vivid, awesome detail and example. And you know, that's not only good civics, that's just good thinking and good writing and good speaking. And so that was fantastic. I also like the idea that in your opening statement, engagement's not enough. We just don't want people, we want people to know something and be engaged at the same time. And I thought that that was a great point. Sometimes, you know, we think that engagement is the end. Well, it's a nice end, but we also want you to know something as you're being engaged. And then one just little thing, Mark, this is a comment for you taking over. Mark, the whole opening statement was peppered with active verbs, you know, and not passive, but active action words. And it makes, as a judge, it makes it come to life. It makes that opening statement come to life. Just a small point, Mark, that I'm not sure that Alan has passed along to you, but every year New Jersey does the same thing. I was really thoroughly impressed from start to finish.
Bingo. I thought you did an outstanding job. It was your opening presentation with all the quotes and the examples, and he told a story, and it was interesting. I was really interested in what you were saying, and you mentioned some things and made some points that we hadn't heard before. In response to our questions, they were well-informed and well-reasoned. Congratulations to you. Specifically, congratulations to you for a job well done during these very extraordinary times. You and your teachers are to be commended for an outstanding job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was also impressed with your opening statement. You were very careful in your choice of words, and it was obviously well prepared, and you didn't waste words and got a lot in. Your quotes were excellent. They were very supportive. You could have done a little bit more in terms of the constitutional link, in terms of the limits of the Constitution, the 18-year-old vote factor that you know, they can't vote, obviously, that non-citizens can't vote. But in general, I thought you did an excellent job.
Thank you very